So let me just start a few questions just to get a sense of how familiar y'all are with certain things and also your opinions. How many of y'all are familiar with Khan Academy? A little bit? Okay, a few. How many of you have used it, either yourself or your children? And how many of you have no idea what it is? Okay, good, that's why here. Now the second set of questions, how many of you think generative AI is going to cause net harm to education? No, a few people. Okay, a few people. How many of you think that it's an unambiguous good for education? Oh, a few more people. And I guess everyone else is a little confused, unsure. Everyone else? All right, okay, sounds good. Well, I'll start just a little bit on Khan Academy, and then we'll talk a lot more about what's going on, and obviously everyone's talking about generative AI. So for those of you who don't know, back in 2004, my original background was in technology. After business school, I find myself, I'm an analyst at a hedge fund in Boston, and it's 2004. I had just gotten married, and my family from New Orleans was visiting me in Boston. I was also born and raised in New Orleans. And it just came out of conversation that one of my cousins, Nadia, who was 12 years old at the time, was having trouble with math, and she was in 7th grade. And so I offered to tutor her. And she agrees, so she goes back to New Orleans. I remotely tutor her. And long story short, that tutoring helped her out. It helped her go from essentially a slower track in mathematics to a more advanced track. Then I'm kind of hooked a little bit. I start tutoring her younger brothers. Word soon spreads in my family that free tutoring is going on. And before I know it, I'm tutoring 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country every day after work. And this is, obviously, once again, my day job was at a hedge fund. And I saw a common pattern. My cousins, it wasn't that they weren't trying hard, or they weren't bright, or they didn't have good teachers. It was usually an issue of in a traditional academic system, you have, say, a test on exponents. Some students get a 90%, some students get an 80%, some students get a 70%. And even though that test has identified some gaps in their knowledge, the whole class will then move on to the next concept. And it's usually going to be a concept that builds on those gaps. And I saw that same issue with my cousins. So I started creating software for them that would help them practice at their own time and pace, that I, as their tutor, could keep track of what they were doing. And that was essentially the beginnings of Khan Academy. And I was at a dinner party in 2006, and one of my friends, he asked me, well, this is all cool, Sal, the stuff you're making for your family, but how are you scaling your actual lessons? And I said, and his name's Zuli, I said, it is hard to do with 15 cousins what I was originally doing with one. And he said, well, why don't you record some of your lessons as videos and upload them onto YouTube for your family? I initially thought it was a horrible idea. I told him YouTube is for cats playing piano. It is not for serious mathematics. I went home that weekend. I got over the idea that it was not my idea. And I gave it a shot. And I just started putting lessons up that I found myself having to explain over and over again to my family. And after about a month or two, I asked my cousins for feedback, and they somewhat famously told me that they like me better on YouTube than in person. And it's worth clarifying what I think they were saying at the time, because I think it even has implications for what we're going to talk about with generative AI. The pattern that was forming is I saw a lot of gains tutoring one cousin, then 2 cousins, then 3 cousins, but then scaling became difficult. And then I started looking for tools to help me scale, writing software for them, making videos for them. And what my cousins were saying is that it wasn't that they didn't appreciate being able to get me on the phone, or that I, as their older cousin, was taking interest in their life. But what they were saying when they said that they liked those YouTube videos is in the middle of the night, no one's available, you could get these things. They were on demand. You could watch them on double speed. You could watch them on half speed. If maybe you're in an algebra class, but you forgot a little bit of your 5th grade decimals or fractions, you didn't have to be embarrassed anymore. You could watch this content without feeling embarrassed. So I took it as positive feedback, and I kept going. It soon became clear that people who are not my cousins started watching. And a lot of them, and it was initially just a thank you here or there. But then the feedback started to get more intense. I remember in the early days, a mother had written to me saying, thank you so much. This content is allowing both of my sons who have learning disabilities to keep up with their class. Because of that, my family prays for you and your family every night. And you have to imagine how powerful that was for me. My day job, I was an analyst at a hedge fund. I was not used to people praying for me, at least in that way. So I kept going, and you fast forward to about 2009, and there were about 50 to 100,000 folks who were using these things per month that were using these things that I'd originally made for my cousins. And that's when even then, in 2008, 2009, I still thought I was going to do the hedge fund job until I could kind of do things on my own terms. But it started to take over my life. I set up Khan Academy as a not-for-profit, mission-free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere, and quit my day job to see if we could turn it into a real thing. Long story short, that first year, tough. I think anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, you almost have to start with delusional optimism, so to speak, and then you quickly come to terms with maybe the universe isn't fully ready to invest in what you're working on. But then by 2010, all of a sudden it came out of the woodwork. Executives at Google were looking to fund something that had a shot at educating large chunks of the country and then eventually the world. Folks at the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates in particular, started, I had no idea, started publicly talking about how he was using Khan Academy to educate his own children, and even for himself in certain cases. And so in the fall of 2010, we became a real organization. We got funding from Google and the Gates Foundation, and then since then, many, many others to execute on this mission of free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And the journey over that last 12, 13 years, it's been kind of wild. I have this theory that I share with a lot of the stakeholders at Khan Academy that it feels sometimes that benevolent aliens are using Khan Academy to prepare humanity for first contact. And we'll talk about it in a few minutes. We'll only reinforce that. But we've now gone from, I guess, one cousin with Nadia to we're about 160 million registered users around the world. It's in 50 languages around the world. And we're looking to, and it's very strong in math, and we're building out science, and we're aligning it to as many content areas as we can. Now, just to kind of close the loop on the cousins, this right over here is a picture of my family, and it's a fun picture because the first three students of Khan Academy are the taller ones in that picture. That's Nadia, who's there between myself and my wife, and then her younger brothers, who are the two taller gentlemen there. But it's a fun picture because my kids are now the exact same age that Nadia and her brothers were when I started tutoring them, and then Nadia and her brothers are now almost exactly the same age I was. And very recently, I had trouble convincing my daughter that she should get tutoring from me, and I was able to force my cousins to pay it backward, I guess, pay it forward. And so now they're starting to tutor my kids. So all of this does come back. But the big picture, what I was doing to some degree intuitively with my cousins, it's been well documented that one-to-one tutoring can be very powerful. And Benjamin Bloom, famous education psychologist, has essentially quantified what this effect could be back in 1984. And when he published this paper, he called it the 2 sigma problem. We'll talk in a second why he framed it as a problem. But what he says, if you took just a normal bell curve, a literal normal distribution, that's that middle conventional curve, and if you gave people one-to-one tutoring, then you can get this curve on the right, which is this 2 standard deviation improvement. That's where the 2 sigma comes from. And for those of y'all who might have forgotten a little bit of your statistics, 2 standard deviations is very, very dramatic. It would take someone from roughly the 50th percentile to the 95th or the 96th percentile. It would take a student who's below average and take them well above average. Now, the reason why Benjamin Bloom framed this as a problem is he said, well, there's no way we're going to be able to give every kid in the public school system one-on-one tutoring, although we can see it has a very, very large effect. And then that middle curve, he said, well, maybe we can approximate what a tutor would do using technology. And this was back in 1984, but even with some primitive technology, he was able to show a 1 standard deviation improvement within a pretty narrow field. Now, what's interesting is to a large degree, everything I've talked about so far, the entire journey of Khan Academy to date, has really been, to some degree, tackling that middle distribution, that mastery learning. What can we approximate with personalized software? I guess we could say pre-generative AI personalized software. What can we approximate with on-demand video? And we actually are seeing that effect. We have over 50 efficacy studies on Khan Academy. Almost all of them have the same narrative, that if students are putting in 30 to 60 minutes a week, that they're accelerating 30, 40, 50%. We just had a study that if we compare students who have done it for more than 1 year, for every hour they do it more in the second year, for every hour they're getting a 50th of a standard deviation improvement. For every hour they're doing it less, compared to themselves, they're getting a 50th of a standard deviation slowing down. So it almost matches, if you imagine 50 hours in the course of a school year, the results that Benjamin Bloom got in 1984. Now, what's interesting is, I always thought this journey at Khan Academy, that last distribution, the 101, was a little bit of a holy grail that maybe we may not even get to in our lifetime. And then last year, around almost exactly this time, OpenAI reached out to us. This was obviously well before ChatGPT existed. For those of you all who don't know, ChatGPT is built on GPT 3.5. But the OpenAI team said, hey, we're working on the next generation model, which ended up being GPT-4. And they told us that we think this is going to be very exciting, but also a little bit scary for folks. And so we want to launch it with some social positive use cases. Education and healthcare were the two that they saw, and in hindsight, those are the most obvious areas. And we want to launch it with folks that people can trust are going to do right by them. And I was skeptical at first. I'd been paying attention to GPT-2 and GPT-3. But then when we saw what the capabilities were, we said this actually has a chance of allowing us in a scalable way to tackle that right distribution. So what I'm going to show you, we launched in March 15th, our generative AI tutor that is built on top of GPT-4 and eventually other models as well, we call Khanmigo. But let me just jump into it. I show this because these are the headlines that everyone has been talking about for the last 6 months to 9 months. And what we're going to talk about is not only do we think that it's going to mitigate the risks of cheating and ChatGPT doing students' homework, but we actually think it's going to get to a world where it's going to accelerate them pretty dramatically by being a tutor for every student and being a teaching assistant for every teacher, helping them with lesson plans and things like that. So this right over here is just an exercise on Khan Academy. Some of y'all might have done it yourself or seen your children do it. But what's new is this little a bot here at the right. And if a student clicks on it, the first thing to notice, some guardrails. Conversation is recorded and viewable by your teacher. And if the student says, just tell me the answer, very entitled student here, says, as your friendly AI tutor, Khanmigo, I'm here to help you learn and work through this. What do you think the first step should be to solve this equation? So it's not just telling the student the answer. And as you can see, not only is it recognizing when the student might have made a mistake, I see that you tried to simplify the equation, but I'm curious how you got to that step. Can you explain your thought process? It's actually doing what I would say not just an average tutor would do, but a world-class tutor, asking the student to explain their reasoning. It's diagnosing. You can tell that it can tell that the student misused the distributive property right there. This is encoding, and this is a big deal because we've all wanted more students to learn how to code, but there aren't a lot of coding teachers in the world. And I have a background in computer science, but I would say that this is a better coding tutor than I can be. If a student says, why is only the left cloud moving? This is an exercise where the student's trying to get both clouds to part. Well, it can go into the code, and once again, it's not telling the answer, but it's doing what a good tutor would do. Hey, you might want to think about another variable, putting it in another place where you can try to get the other cloud to move. And it's kind of amazing that it even understands what a cloud is when people are generating them with a bunch of ellipses. And even if that commenting wasn't there about the clouds, it actually still works, which is, I find, somewhat mind-blowing. It doesn't just work on exercises, it works on videos. Students can ask the classic question, why do I need to learn this? And it can answer, well, here it says, what do you care about? I can help explain how to learn about sizes in science to connect to your interests. And here, I want to be a professional athlete. And now the AI can answer this question. And one of the interesting things we're actually building right now is for the artificial intelligence to have a sense of memory. So if you tell it the things that you care about, it will remember the things that you care about. And then even if a teacher or a parent asks what it has been working on with the student, it can say, hey, did you know that they want to be a professional athlete? And when I connect it to those concepts, the student is more engaged. So we launched on March 15th, and we immediately said we want to put this in front of real students. And so what I'm going to show you some videos now. This is in Newark Public Schools in Newark, New Jersey. This is not some special school district. It's a large urban school district that has all of the opportunity and all of the problems of a traditional large public school district. And we chose Newark because Newark, incidentally, even before generative AI, is doing some very, very powerful things with Khan Academy. Expect to hear more about that. But this is, these are a few of the students talking about using it in their real classrooms.
I love it because when it knows a summary, it knows many different things, and it knows Spanish, Portuguese, and English, and it knows it's really smart, but it doesn't know everything.
And one of the things, she mentioned Spanish and Portuguese, it literally works in every language. I've even gotten it to tutor me in conversational Sanskrit. So it's a brave new world we're entering. Here's another student.
It just helped me out with it. It didn't give me the answer, but it helped me out get the answer.
I feel like it's like a tutor, you know, like a non-expense paid tutor. Like when you're on it, it doesn't like Audrey said, it doesn't give you the answers straight away, but it like guides you through. It's like guides you through the work to like make it more fun. So it's like a little person sitting next to you, like telling you how to do the problem.
And that's on the student side. And you know, it allows students to do things even beyond going to a tutor, things that normal tutors wouldn't do. This is an activity that we've introduced where they can talk to, we can talk to historical characters. You can talk to literary characters. Here, we could talk to Eeyore the donkey. Oh, hello there, it's me, Eeyore. Not that anyone would notice. But since you're here, what would you like to talk about? Just remember, I'm an AI simulation. Why are you so pessimistic? And Eeyore says, well now, isn't that a question? I suppose it's just my nature, you see. Some donkeys are born with a sunny disposition, others, well, we see the thistles more than the roses. But that's life, isn't it? We can't all be Tiggers bouncing about. Now what about you? Do you find yourself more of a Tigger or an Eeyore in your own life, I think is where it's complete. So it's not just answering the questions, it's actually driving some of the conversations. This is students being able to debate the AI about a topic. This is an example where it's obviously a hot topic in the US around should the government cancel student debt. And we've gotten very strong feedback from high school students who've been piloting it that it's allowing them to really test their arguments, take both sides of an argument, and come to class that much more confident for a real Socratic dialogue. This is an activity we're just introducing which directly addresses a lot of the fears around ChatGPT. ChatGPT obviously was not built for education. It was just a chat interface initially on top of GPT 3.5, but people immediately saw that this could be used to write essays and essentially do homework and cheat. This is an activity where a student can write an essay and it gives feedback on what the student's doing, and it can highlight parts of it and give feedback according to the structure. So you start with a vivid scene to land the reader in a story, but then it takes sense to step back and tell the story has happened to you. This is, we haven't fully launched this yet, but this is not just a demo. This is live, what the AI is actually saying about this essay here. And so this starts to expand our thinking of it doesn't just have to be a chat interface. It could be an interface where it really is acting like a writing coach. And what we think is a solution, which is going to be launched in a few months, is teachers are going to develop assignments with Khanmigo, with the AI. They're going to assign it with the AI. Students are going to be able to work on their essays, brainstorming, doing outlining, and then getting feedback. And the AI is part of the process, but it's not doing it for the student. And then it can report back to the teachers, like, this is where I think the student is, this is my preliminary assessment. And if a student went to ChatGPT to cheat and just copy and pasted an essay in there, the AI is actually going to be able to say, look, I don't know where this essay came from. The student just copied and pasted it here. There was definitely no process, which would actually be a red flag. And we think that's the best way of preventing cheating, because people have talked about creating these detectors, like these plagiarism detectors. That's essentially going to be impossible. We think the way to do it is actually make it part of the process that the AI can actually report on. Everything I've talked about so far is the student side of things. Now I'll show you the teacher. This is a question in American history on Khan Academy. And if a student, there's two modes you can be in if you're in a teacher. You can be in student mode or teacher. This is in student mode. If you say, tell me the answer, it won't tell you the answer. It's trying to tutor you. But then if you go to the top and you switch it to teacher mode now, and you say, tell the answer, not only will it tell the answer and be something of a teacher's guide, it'll actually help the teacher create lessons. So can you give me a good lesson hook? Make it exciting. So this is something to hook the students in the beginning of class. It says, absolutely. How about starting the lesson with a short role play activity? Divide your students into groups and assign each group a different country involved in the Spanish-American War. And you can make it, hey, can you make it more about our local students, or make it more about this sport, or make it more about this interest, and you'll be able to do it. And teachers spend hours a week doing this type of lesson planning, and we think we could take it down by probably a factor of 10, saving them a lot more time and energy for themselves and their students. And here's just a little bit of what some teachers have been saying about it.
The buy-in is so important. Like, student engagement is the key to education. So if the students are able to ask the personalized questions and gives an answer that's relevant to them, they're going to feel more empowered to do the work and feel inspired to, try to learn these things that otherwise they might say, what's the point?
I think Khan Academy is kind of, leading us through that safe path of, let's support the kids, let's manage it, let's control it, let's monitor it and make it safe, so that then we can, allow the educational world to look at how can this really impact education and how can it make it better.
So I'll just finish. We started with this idea of the 2 sigma problem. I'll reframe it as a 2 sigma opportunity, because I actually do think we can now use generative AI to address that last distribution that Benjamin Bloom framed back in 1984. There's a ton of stuff that's going to come, and even for someone who's in the middle of the field, it's amazing how fast all of this stuff is happening. But I'll just say one last thing. I know there's a lot of policymakers in the audience here. There's a lot of fear here. A lot of it is justified about what AI can do, and there's a strong desire to essentially start putting guardrails in place. And there probably will have to be some regulatory guardrails in place. But the one thing I advocate for is, when we look at it, we have to definitely identify what the harms are before we start putting guardrails on it. And also look at it relative to what it was before. So people talk about harms of potentially misinformation. Well, the internet already has more significant misinformation. Bias, once again, the internet, or even sometimes a human teacher can have significant bias. And so what are the right guardrails in place that don't prevent us from taking advantage? Because we think the upsides of this could be significant. So the name of the game from our point of view is, and I didn't think this was going to happen in our lifetime, our mission is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere, trying to scale what I was able to do for Nadia back in 2004. And it now feels like we're living in a science fiction book. And if we really kind of put our heads together and focus in the right way, I actually think we have a chance of really pulling that off, leveraging traditional technologies and generative AI, and make world-class education really just a fundamental human right. Thank you.